So as we talk about the media, one of the things that we're going to talk about the most is bias. So I'm just going to kind of go over some examples of bias for you. Um, since that's what the kind of the chapter was talking about, all these different types of bias. I want to focus on a few of these. And the first one I want to focus on is anchoring bias. So let me get my drawing tool here. What you can kind of see here, anchoring bias is when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information that we come across. So it's almost like if we're trying to be lazy. Sorry, this is kind of hard to write, but lazy, right? And we come across something, we're like, all right, whatever. That's what I'm going to rely on. Usually it's when a lot of times for me anyway, I find I can fall in this sort of bias when I don't really care a whole lot about something, when I'm not very passionate about something. And I kind of, I read something about it, okay, whatever, I'm just going to believe that then. If you're a little more passionate about something, you tend to, what's the word I'm looking for? Tend to look out and seek more information about that thing. Whereas if you're not, you can probably easily fall into this term they call anchoring bias. I'm going to go ahead and move on here to the next slide. Let me exit my drawing tool there. There we go. Okay. So next one I'm going to talk about is confirmation bias, because just like how anchoring bias was, maybe if you're kind of too lazy, you don't really care a whole lot about a topic to really think about it a whole lot, and you'll kind of just trust whatever the first thing is you'll see. Confirmation bias is kind of the opposite. Confirmation bias is when we feel so strongly about something that we want it to be true. And what we're going to do is we're going to seek out information that only confirms our beliefs. Like right here, it says maybe like Instagram feeds or whatever else, anything online where we may do like a Google search of whatever it is that we're interested in looking for. Maybe we're trying to prove a friend wrong or something, and all of the results that pop up after that might be kind of proving us wrong or not necessarily proving us right, but then we might find that one down on the page that's like, this kind of confirms what I believe, and this will show them what I'm saying is true. So that's kind of confirmation bias, and we tend to fall under this when we feel really strongly about something. And I wanted to kind of talk about those two, because they're kind of, at least what I personally notice, both myself and a lot of other people falling into those traps, where we either don't care a whole lot and we're somewhere like right over here with anchoring bias, or we care so much that we're somewhere in confirmation bias. And it's kind of hard to find that in between to where we're being honest with ourselves and honest with other people. Some of these other types of bias right here we can talk about too. I won't go too in depth with some of those, but like blind spot bias is where you're recognizing the bias in others but not in yourself. And negativity bias is something that media focuses on a lot, and in general they just want to focus on negative things happening all the time. There's a real reason for that. It's because we just, as humans, tend to want to hear about the negative more than we do the positive. So I wanted to kind of talk about some of those things. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. What I wanted to get to are some interesting kind of like importance of the freedom of press, and some of the founders' views on those things. And these are all from quotes from letters and things like that. And these are from Thomas Jefferson. And this is kind of an interesting one because he's basically saying, if it were up to me to have a government with no newspapers or newspapers without a government, I would want newspapers without government. So that's kind of interesting to hear about, and we can kind of talk about, why that is, because basically what he's trying to say, as long as people are informed, right? As long as we have an informed citizenry, we can make decisions for ourselves. It's when we're not informed that then we have to rely on other people, like a government, to make decisions for us. So obviously, anarchy usually doesn't turn out to be a very good thing, but if you're trying to choose between a government with no information given to you, the only info that gets to you is what government controls, or no government with a massive amount of information, he's kind of just saying maybe it would be better to have that option. Nobody's saying we should have that option, but as far as which one would be better, that's kind of what Thomas Jefferson is saying. Now, remember this quote because he kind of jumps back and forth on this, where he goes from one end of the spectrum about liking freedom of the press and the media to the other end where he's kind of not liking it so much. But we'll kind of clarify his thoughts on this here. So I want to go ahead and scroll down. I'm going to scroll down to another quote of his here. So right here, he's saying, as for what is not true, you will always find abundance in the newspapers. So you may be scratching your head here, thinking, well, wait a second, didn't he just say he would rather have newspapers without government than a government without newspapers? So he seemed like he was a fan in the first one, and now he's kind of saying, man, everything that you'll find that's not true is going to be in abundance, right? So he's not saying it's just a little bit, he's saying in abundance in the newspapers. Well, this doesn't necessarily negate his last comment, because basically what he's saying here, and there's a reason I wrote that word down on the other one, informed. Because he's kind of right here. I mean, you're going to find things that, well, today, in today's papers, a lot of what you're going to find might be true, but it might not tell the whole story, right? It might only tell one side. So what he's trying to say here is, look, he doesn't hate newspapers and thinks they're good. Freedom of the press is a good thing. But you are going to find a lot of either not true information in them, and certainly back in revolutionary times and early American history, you would have seen some things that were not true, especially as political parties were kind of the main publishers of newspapers back then. But what he's saying is, look, as long as you stay informed, right, you're going to be able to point out what's not true or what's not the whole story. So that's the big thing there, is staying informed, and that's kind of what he's trying to get at here, and what he was trying to get at in the first quote that we saw. I'm going to go down to one more that kind of interesting. So now he's saying nothing can now be believed which is seen in a newspaper. And if you're looking at the dates on these, they're like within a year apart from each other, where these snippets of quotes are coming from. Nothing can now be believed which is seen in a newspaper. So again, though, if you're looking at that, you might be like, oh, what the heck's he saying? I thought this is really confusing now. But what's really trying to be said here, is you can't just outright believe something that you read a lot of the times. And, unless you really trust a source or whatever, then go for it. What we should do if you care about something enough, like an issue enough, is you should provisionally, hopefully I think that's with 2 S's, there we go. Provisionally, I don't know if I spelled that right, but that's provisionally. And what that means is you should temporarily believe it, right? For the sake of conversation or for the sake of whatever you're reading. And if you want to, you can go back later after you've already, read what it is you're reading. If you're really passionate about what you just read, you're like, something seems off about that, or I want to make sure that that's actually true, or whatever this professor is saying is true. I believed it in lecture, but now I kind of want to see what it's saying is true, or whatever Lucas is saying. I'm going to go double check that. So what you would want to do, if you cared about it enough, is you would want to go later after that event or article or lecture or video or whatever it is you watch. You'd want to confirm what was being said, right? So just like in a newspaper back in Thomas Jefferson's day, you don't just want to outright believe something. Again, if you don't care about something a whole lot, you're probably not going to take the time to go back and confirm that it's true or not, because you don't care about it. But if there's something that you really are passionate about, please take the time, go back and confirm, is this true? Is this news report I just heard true? Or is this thing I saw on Instagram, which obviously they wouldn't have had any idea about, is this true? So you want to confirm that stuff. Because in the end, Thomas Jefferson, and we're not trying to poke fun at Thomas Jefferson. He likes freedom of the press, but he's just trying to warn us, look, there's a lot of traps that we can fall into, and there is a lot of untrue things being said. So that kind of gets us into where we're going here with filter bubbles. I'm going to go back up here. So filter bubbles are a really interesting concept. They've existed for a long time, but they've become increasingly easier to fall into and create. So a filter bubble, if you've ever heard of it before, we'll just draw this bubble right here. Draw this bubble right here. So this bubble, when it comes to information, when we look at social media and things like that, is all of the things that we like. So I'm going to draw little smiley faces in here. These are all things that we like, all bits of information, all people that we agree with, everybody that we follows that's posting things that make us happy or that fall in line with our beliefs. Those all fit within our bubbles. And obviously, when it comes to social media, Meta, whatever it is you're using, they use algorithms. Whatever, I'm not going to spell the whole thing out. You get the point. Algorithms. And these algorithms basically find what you like, right? And that's all they feed you. They just feed you the good stuff. Well, what you're missing out on is other bits of information, because the algorithms think, well, you don't really look at those, or you exit out of those really fast. You must not like those very much. So it keeps them out. And the only things you see are this. So you don't really learn a lot when you get trapped in a filter bubble. And the reason for that is, I mean, you learn a little bit, but you don't see other perspectives, and that's a problem. And we'll kind of talk about that this week and some of the activities that we do there. So the main things I wanted to cover in this, just so you have some background information, are types of biases, kind of how some of our early founders, particularly Thomas Jefferson, felt about newspapers and the freedom of the press. And then kind of getting into this, what do we deal with today? Well, with the massive amount of information that gets fed to us today via algorithm, we create these filter bubbles. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on a lot this week with activities. So thanks for listening.